This is Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
It's the first Saturday of the month, and every first Saturday of the month here on Right to Life Radio, we try to highlight our stories from the sidewalk, the stories of the interactions that we at Right to Life of Central California are having with the women and couples that we engage with as they go into and out of the Planned Parenthood clinic located on Fulton Street to try to share with them the gospel of life. Joining me to talk about it today is our friend and Right to Life employee, Linda Talio. Welcome again, Linda, to Right to Life Radio and Stories on the Sidewalk.
Sorry. Thank you
you
again.
You got a frog in your throat. There you go.
I have issues today.
Right.
Let's just point them all out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for those of you listening on the radio, you won't be able to see it, but Linda's got a small bandage under her eye. It's a skin thing that she's dealing with. It is not.
Now
for
we're
those,
gonna put it all out there.
Yeah. For those of you watching on YouTube, just know she's not getting into fist fights on the sidewalk. That's not what's happening here.
Well, then I wouldn't have anything because I would win.
Right. Exactly. Well,
Look at
I was
me.
going to say you should see the other guy. So. Today, we want to talk about we try to do this segment once a month, every first Saturday of the month, and just to let people know about the impact that we're having here at Right to Life of Central California and some of the cool things that are happening out there. So we had a young lady that you guys interacted with, and you were able to help her have sort of a change of heart on the abortion question. So maybe tell our listeners about that.
All right. I think last time I was on, I was sort of down because it seemed like nothing was happening. Passing out a lot of flyers, but just sort of hoping that something was happening.
Yeah, sure.
And it does. I mean, statistics say that it is happening.
Yeah, and of course, with that kind of work, I mean, Planned Parenthood thinks that this stuff happens, and actually they've introduced two, like we talked about it last week on the show, they've introduced these two terrible bills that probably don't have any chance of passing to restrict our ability to do what we do. But so we do know it's effective, and you'll never know the stuff you don't know about. Right. But obviously, it can be discouraging.
It's nice to know.
It's nice to know. It's nice to know.
So today we're going to know.
Right. Good.
We had one day, and the problem with these kind of days is usually it means Planned Parenthood is doing a lot of business. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a week or two ago, we had a young, well, I'm going to call her a mom because she's a mom.
Yep.
Was getting ready to go in, and I approached her. I said, "Hey, is there anything I can talk to you about?" And she said, "Yeah, actually, I'm here to get an abortion, but I don't really want to." Mm. And I was like, "Ooh, open door."
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, we have a building next door, and it's nice, and we can just go in and we can sit and we can talk and you could tell me your story." Mm-hmm. And so she came over and she started talking, and she was there because her boyfriend told her that she needed to have an abortion. Mm-hmm. While she was sitting in the parking lot, he called her and said, "You need to have an abortion because I already have 3 kids." And she was like, "What?"
Jeez.
Didn't know.
So yet again, abortion, this great empowering force for feminism to allow a man to shirk his responsibilities, basically. So,
over and over.
Yeah.
So already, I mean, I'm going to say she was 18, mm-hmm. and he was older. I think he was in his late 20s. But they'd been dating for a year, and she was thinking, "Oh, it's fine, big deal. So I'm pregnant, Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then he was like, And so we talked, and
because frankly, it sort of makes me wonder how many months over the age of 18 she was, and that actually raises some interesting and troubling questions, but at any rate, yeah.
So she just poured her heart out and her story out, and she was like, I don't want to have an abortion. I just don't know what else to do. My boyfriend wants me to have one, and blah blah." And so I asked the pop question that I like to ask, and I said, "So what about your mom? Mm-hmm. Where is she on this?" And she was like, "She doesn't want me to have an abortion.
She doesn't want it." Yeah.
And I said, "All right then, let's give your mom a call." And let your mom be a mom, mm-hmm. because that's really important to us moms to be able to be included. And I said, "I think you're going to be surprised once you have this conversation, how much strength you're going to gain from it." Mm-hmm. And then she was getting texts, and it was her brother. And her brother was saying, "Don't do this."
Yeah.
So ultimately, after a long time, because she still was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I live with my mom. We have an apartment, blah, blah, blah. I need to move out and all this stuff. Sorry, again.
That's fine.
It's issues.
It's fine.
So then I said, you know what? We have all kinds of resources. And I started naming them off. We have the Catholic Charities, which will provide you with food and some kinds of schooling and help you possibly get a job. And then the Evangel House, they, have places where you can live. And she was like, wow, I didn't know there were all these places. So we have the resources.
Yeah.
We don't do everything. We don't expect anyone to do everything.
Sure.
But we do know where to send people who need help.
Right.
It's Pregnancy Care Center. We sent her over there. And since then, Sarah, one of our employees / volunteers, actually Sarah came over we had a second conversation. She came over and she interacted with her too. And then Sarah followed up and she'd requested that one of us go to her doctor's appointment with her. But we haven't really heard anything for about a week. But sometimes that happens. Yeah. Sometimes they gain their strength and that's all they need.
Right. And it's at their, obviously it's at their call and we can suggest but obviously the ball's in their court. And
exactly.
it's so cool it's so cool the idea of, let your mom be a mom, like, involving the family in it, because I think the picture that's painted for these young women is that there are no options. They're sort of presented with this sort of sucker's choice that maintain the status quo or else there's nothing. And no, those aren't the only two options. No. And there are lots.
You're right. It is prevalent. We don't really promote as a society that there's help.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah. Well, it becomes this sort of politically charged thing on the left of, because they're so aggressive in wanting to push abortion rights, they wind up underselling the fact that actually, even if you are genuinely pro-choice and that's genuinely what you believe, you should try to make all of those choices known and available. And it's so ironic when you see Planned Parenthood in their annual reports, their numbers of adoption referrals just go down into the down, fewer and fewer and fewer every year. But their numbers of abortions just go up. And that's more of what they do. It's just pure abortion. And obviously from Planned Parenthood's end, they're financially incentivized to push that narrative. But to sort of, I mean, I've even seen people say stuff like, well, I'd rather abort my baby than put him or her in the foster care system or something. Yeah, like this notion that any option other than abortion is just impossible. When really, no, there are a lot of people out here willing to help. And that's the great thing about what we're doing is that we can, while we're not necessarily able to do all those things, we can get them hooked up to all the people who can do those things. Yeah.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point on a simple choice of a word. Yeah. Choice.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we should be talking about what the definition of choice actually is.
Sure.
Because in my opinion, choice means having all the information.
Right.
And choosing what is right for you.
Right.
And oftentimes they don't have all the information.
Sure. Well, and it's almost impossible for an entity like Planned Parenthood realistically to really be about choice because one of the choices gets them
money,
a nice lump of cash from Medi-Cal, and none of the other choices do. The adoption referral doesn't make them any money. The option to let them know, people in your life love you and are willing to help you and can help take care of you. Maybe talk to your mom about this. No, they have no incentive on Planned Parenthood's part to do that. And it makes you really wonder, I mean, how free is a choice?
It's only
if you think if you think it's your only option, it's not much of a choice at all. And when you see abortion, I mean, if it was genuinely if abortion were genuinely connected to women making totally free, independent choices,
right,
it wouldn't be way more prevalent among lower income communities, and it is.
I think that's what used to bother me so much about the escorts. They haven't been back yet. But we call these people escorts, these women that
they're Planned Parenthood, like either employees or volunteers who sort of walk with the women from the parking lot.
Shielding them from us. Yeah. So that would frustrate me because these women, most of them are older than me, which, is basically older than dirt.
But it is weird. It's a very specific kind of demographic. It's these sort of older white, usually white women who are sort of. There's a sort of paternalism to it that's weird and creepy.
Yeah, it's different. But so there's these women who've obviously lived a lot of life, and I'm thinking, okay, if you really believe in this movement of choice and empowerment, why are you so afraid of me speaking to them?
Right.
You know, why are you afraid of having someone be allowed to empower themselves?
Give some options. Yeah.
Not even just options. Let them have a chance to have a conversation. They've seen me out there enough. I'm not aggressive.
Right. Exactly. You're. It's not like you're.
I'm
ranting and raving or anything.
Like, hey, let me help you.
Now, you had another story I know that you wanted to share about because the impact that we have being out there, it's not just obviously the chief reason we're there for the women and couples going in and out, but even on passerby, our witness has an impact. So tell me a little bit about one of the people you interacted with out there.
I'll do that. I was just standing out on the street getting ready to pass out information. And this woman pulls up, which is always a little nerve-wracking for me because I never know what they're going to do. Sometimes it's their one finger wave. And
well, of course.
This time she said, hi, I've been driving by here every day. And then I got sick, and so I haven't been driving by. And then today I'm better. And I realized that I'm being called to come and find out what you guys are doing because I want to help.
That's
I really
so
want to
cool.
help. And so I said, hey, we love help. And this is what we do. And I was able to offer her one of the videos we had just made. I just said, here, I'll just text you the video and it'll give you a little summary of what we do. And if you feel so called, come back out. Just contact us. And that was pretty neat and reassuring because this person, it was just clear that she felt like this was a cause that she wanted to be involved in. Right. So much so that she pulled over the side of the road on Fulton Street.
Yeah, which is
near Belmont.
Generally not a great idea, but it's good. It's good to know that she did that.
There she was. So a couple of good things happening. We had a couple of other on the same week turnaways. We call those called turnaways, the people who were going to go into Planned Parenthood and get a pregnancy test, and there go over to Crisis Pregnancy Center or Pregnancy Care Center. Sorry. It was Crisis Pregnancy Center in my day.
That was the old name. Yeah, that was the old name back in the day.
I am struggling today.
That's all right. Well, that's so good to hear because we do, especially after 40 Days for Life, which concluded back on Palm Sunday, whenever that was, I guess about a month ago. We have so many people who have sort of said, boy, I'd love to do more. I'd love to do more. So if you are listening to this and are interested in what we do, our sidewalk advocacy program or volunteering to be with us, Planned Parenthood themselves has said that the presence of pro-life protesters, I guess we're not really protesting. We're trying to talk to people.
I call myself an advocate.
Advocates. Yeah, there you go. The presence of such people causes the no-show rates at their abortion clinics to increase enormously. Yeah. And they've even statistically measured it at these Planned Parenthood clinics. So it's not us saying that. That's Planned Parenthood saying that. So if you are interested in working with us, do get in touch with us at 559-229-2229 or email us at info@rtlcc.org, as I'm looking for our timer here, which seems to have mysteriously gone away. So if you are interested, please do get in touch with us. Again, this is a wonderful ministry that we're engaged with. We can always use more people. We can always use more volunteers to be with us. So thank you so much, Linda, for being on Stories from the Sidewalk.
You're welcome.
And when we return, we'll be with our good buddy Jonathan Keller to talk about more of the breaking pro-life news throughout the country and throughout the state of California. More bad legislation coming out of California. Some of it we're pretty sure will be defeated. Others, not so sure. Jonathan Keller will dig into it with us next, right here on Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Jerry Jeff Walker with us today. Not actually with us. Well, actually, he also died this past year.
I was going to say,
in multiple ways,
he's
not
really
with
not
us.
with us.
Yeah. Well, he's neither in the studio nor above room temperature. Anyway, Right to Life Radio.
Ouch.
What a tribute. A tribute to Jerry Jeff Walker. All right. I do love Jerry Jeff Walker, but anyway. Thank you all so much for tuning in, joining me. Those dulcet tones that you hear, and thank you to Linda Talia for doing our Stories from the Sidewalk segment. Joining us with his dulcet tones, the man, the legend. He monitors California state politics, so you don't have to, although he would really appreciate it if you did also, because it would make you a better citizen, and basically if people paid more attention to California state politics, maybe we wouldn't be in such a mess as we are. The one, the only Jonathan Keller from California Family Council.
That's me.
There you go. So, Jonathan, there are other things that you do that I won't do. You will watch every new Marvel movie when it comes out.
Proudly.
I will not. You will get every new Apple device as soon as it comes out. As Jonathan is literally sitting here with 4 Apple devices out on the desk in front of him. He has his iPhone, his iPad, his MacBook, and he's got his Apple Watch.
And just to make it there you go.
And he's got his AirBud.
The hat trick plus 2.
I call them the Airbuds because then it reminds me of the movie Air Bud, in which a golden retriever started playing basketball. So
until the sequel when he's playing football and it's Airbud 2 Golden Receiver.
Thank you.
I wish that was a dad joke, but that is the actual title of the movie.
Also, the fact that you actually know it is pretty impressive. All right. So one of the things Jonathan Keller will do that I won't is watch State of the Union addresses.
Yes.
I gave up watching those a while ago because they're terrible.
Well,
it's basically like 15 minutes of content surrounded by 2 hours of applause and fluff. So Jonathan watched Mr. Biden last night give the State of the Union. There was nothing really mentioned about abortion, but there has been
lots of other spending and etc. But yeah,
lots and lots.
It was
of
a little light on that because surprise, John. Talking about abortion policy in a primetime address is maybe not what the Democrats actually want to be focusing on.
Yeah, they don't want to be focusing on it in spite of the fact that they are doing a lot about it. And this leads me to perhaps the topic of the day, which is a sort of new developing executive action on the part of the Biden administration, basically to roll back a series of Trump executive actions when it comes to using the body parts of aborted children for fetal tissue research. Now, this was a story that David Daleiden kind of blew the lid off of back in 2015. In the summer of 2015, David Daleiden released a whole bunch of undercover videos showing Planned Parenthood officials talking about this marketplace of selling the body parts of unborn children whose bodies they procured during the course of abortions, to researchers in order to be used in fetal tissue research. This is unfortunately legal in the United States if the sale of the body parts of these unborn children is done at cost. That means no one's making a profit. But David Daleiden actually got evidence that people were making a profit off of it, that Planned Parenthood officials and middleman, basically people who would buy this stuff and then turn around and sell it, that this was basically a for-profit business. And regardless of the legalities and illegalities, one of the good things that President Trump did was cut off any use of federal funds to get these samples, these specimens, for fetal tissue research. And basically, the Biden administration is... we'll dig into this more in the next segment, but the Biden administration, basically, they had Jen Psaki, the press secretary, they marched her out and basically had her say, well, President Biden doesn't agree with the position of the Catholic Church on using federal funding to pay for fetal tissue research using the body parts of aborted children, which seems like a very particularized thing to just say that you don't agree with. that and it kind of belies this notion of any sort of seriousness to Joe Biden's Catholic commitments.
John, can I also just say, just as an aside,
you can. It's a radio show.
Do we actually think that Joe Biden, the person, the individual man who is 78 years old, do we think he actually even knows what his own position is on this issue? I mean, I'm not trying to be harsh or dismissive of our geriatric septuagenarian occupant of the Oval Office or anybody. I mean,
soon to be octogenarian.
We all know individuals that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s that are very sharp and very with it. Joe Biden does not strike me as one of those individuals.
Yeah.
And I just, if you asked him in an unscripted, off the cuff moment, what is your position on this very specific issue? And do you agree with the church of which you claim to be a lifelong faithful member?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, this entire it smacks of
right. Well, here's one thing you can definitely say, and it's because of the fact that Joe Biden has changed his positions on so many things. Joe Biden's changed his position on all kinds of stuff relating to abortion, federal funding for abortion. Joe Biden is not someone putting his imprint on his political party. The standard orthodoxy of his political party is making its imprint on him and forming all of his policies. I think that's very fair to say, without even getting into questions of, senility, anything like that. It's clear that his viewpoints that he has historically held are not what's driving the ship. When we return, the question about Catholic bishops wanting to deny Joe Biden communion. Next on Right to Life Radio. Mr. Conway Twitty, ladies and gentlemen. Here on Right to Life Radio with Jonathan Keller. Jonathan here with multiple screens up, as always.
As always.
Jonathan's like one of those characters from like a early to mid 2000s movie who's the hacker character who's got like
I'm
multiple
Emilio
screens
Estevez in the original Mission Impossible.
or like Kevin Smith in that one Die Hard movie that had the Apple guy in it.
Oh, Justin Long. Yeah, you know, I actually have never seen that Die Hard movie.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
It's not very good.
Johnny, do you know how little I actually care about that movie?
How little do you care about that
Several
movie,
years
Jonathan?
ago, Apple was running a special through iTunes. I wanted to get the Die Hard, the first and second Die Hard movies because they are the two best Christmas movies ever made.
All right, thank you. All right,
So
go ahead.
I went online and I noticed, they were running this bundle in December. It's like, hey, you can buy the Die Hard movie franchise for like $15 or $20 or whatever.
For all of the
for
Die
all
Hard
five
movies.
of them. And I was like,
Wait,
well, I mean, I could just buy like these two for $10 each, or I could buy the whole franchise for the same price. I'm like, what the heck? So I own those movies, number 4 and number 5. I've never watched them.
Well, you're not missing out on much, and I think $7.15, $7.50 for Die Hard 1 and 2 a piece is probably worth
That's
it. So,
not too bad.
yeah. All right. Today on the show, we're not going to talk about Die Hard, much to Jonathan's chagrin.
Drat.
Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of inside Catholic baseball.
Ooh.
So sorry, Jonathan. I'm afraid you'll have to leave now.
So I need to know, is the designated hitter part of this, or is that the wrong league? That's inside Protestant baseball.
This is figurative baseball we're talking about. Yeah. Inside Protestant baseball means that the designated hitter is not allowed to drink. So anyway. So what we're going to talk about is Joe Biden and the particular stance he's in vis-a-vis the Catholic faith because of his abortion stance. And a ridiculous Washington Post headline
yes,
that appeared today that one characterized certain Catholic bishops who are concerned about Mr. Biden's pro-choice stance and are talking about the possibility of denying him reception of Holy Communion. First, it characterizes these bishops as right-wing, which I can assure you manifestly they are not, and they refer to Joe Biden as the that a group of read the exact headline.
Let me read
Jonathan.
the
You have
exact
it right
quote
there.
because it's just so hilarious. Washington Post 21 hours ago, a rising group of right-wing U.S. Catholic bishops is colliding with a very Catholic president who supports abortion rights.
So a lot of people have noted that, and I retweeted this guy Josh Hammer, who's I enjoy reading. He's a op-ed columnist and he's the op-ed editor for Newsweek, who mentions that a very Catholic president who supports abortion rights is kind of like a very devout Jewish person who eats a BLT sandwich for lunch every single day. That basically there's a kind of inherent contradiction there. Catholicism is not what you make of it. It has an actual objective content to it against which you can judge an individual's beliefs or actions. It provides an actual objective standard against which you can judge someone's beliefs and actions to see if they are or are not in conformity with it. It's not Catholicism isn't the friends we made along the way. There's an actual objective content to it, and it leads me into this is sort of an abortion adjacent question because really it doesn't necessarily deal with abortion in our particular time and place. It deals with abortion, but the notion of whether or not Catholic priests and bishops should refuse Holy Communion to politicians who support abortion. Now, I don't know if there's an equivalent discussion like this within the Protestant churches. Maybe something about affiliation, like can you be excommunicated from your Protestant churches due to creedal differences?
Yeah, I think as an example, though I do not currently attend or I'm not currently a member of a Southern Baptist church, the largest denomination, Protestant evangelical denomination in the United States is the Southern Baptist Convention.
Right.
And they have a very, we'll say, loose hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
It's highly independent. There's not a real sense
you
of...
are Peter, and on this committee I will build... No, just
that's sort Sort of.
Just teasing.
There's a lot of flexibility, I'll just say, between. But the point being, I have seen the most of what I've seen them do on certain issues is if there is a church that kind of steps out of line and says, hey, we endorse this policy that is explicitly in opposition to Scripture,
Sure.
then that church is basically disfellowshipped. They say, well, you can no longer call yourself a Southern Baptist church. Now,
Right.
they don't take away their property. They don't do a... It's not a ceremony like the movie Beckett, that pretty awesome scene you showed me that one time. There's not a formal excommunication process.
Right.
But I mean, I think if it's something that is so manifestly outside the bounds of orthodoxy, you got to do something.
Exactly. And so, and this is the sort of ridiculous thing about the people criticizing Joe Biden is that this isn't kind of a little whoops-a-daisy. This is a manifest, decades-long position, which has resulted in numerous votes and now in numerous executive actions to support abortion rights, to support federal funding for abortion, to support federal funding to use the body parts of aborted children in research, to do all kinds of things that are inconsistent with the Catholic faith. Beyond that, I'll also note Joe Biden has officiated at 2 gay weddings, which for most Catholics is not for most Catholics. For the teaching of the Catholic Church, that is a major no-no on several different levels.
To quote Liz Lemon, that's a deal breaker,
That's
ladies.
a deal breaker, ladies. Yes, for all of you 30 Rock fans out there. There are probably 3 people listening to this who enjoyed that, and 2 of them were our wives. So thank you, Jonathan. So these bishops are being criticized as a bunch of right-wingers and radicals. Oh, they're weaponizing religion and interfering in church and state dynamics. Well, especially for our non-Catholic listeners, I just figured I would talk about things from my side of the street. Jonathan described sort of the situation with Southern Baptists, that obviously there's a certain importance to doctrine that if you stray so far from doctrine that eventually any sort of group, whatever it is, has to sort of disaffiliate themselves from you. Within the context of the Catholic faith, the Eucharist is, in addition to us Catholics believing the Eucharist is the body and blood of Christ, we also believe that it is an important sign of our communion amongst our communion with Jesus Christ and our communion with the fellow members of the church. And that receiving Holy Communion is not just, this isn't just a goodie that they pass out at the end of Mass to make us all feel good, that this has a very significant importance in how it's feeding you in the life of grace, but also it's a statement of your affiliation with the broader body of Christ, with the church. So it has this sort of literal sense to it that we Catholics believe in, that it is the body of Christ, but it also has a kind of sacramental or spiritual or metaphorical significance of being part of the body of Christ. And someone who has placed themselves, like your analogous Southern Baptist church that maybe now says they're in favor of gay marriage or whatever.
Yeah. They believe that abortion is just, a personal choice. Let's put it that way.
Right. So your hypothetical left-leaning Southern Baptist church that gets disaffiliated, it's because basically they think the Southern Baptists would say this group has separated itself from our communion within the faith of Jesus Christ. Similarly, we as Catholics would say that someone who is engaging in manifest grave sins is just demonstrating by their lifestyle that they're leading a life that's not consistent with the teaching of the church, and that we can't just act as though everything's hunky-dory. It would be hypocritical. It would be hypocritical for Southern Baptists to have as part of their communion a bunch of people who didn't really believe what Southern Baptists believe. It would be hypocritical of us to just keep giving communion to someone who, one, has problems as far as what he believes, but also as far as what he does. One of the examples I've brought up with this is the Emperor Theodosius, who was a Roman emperor in the Western Roman Empire in the 4th century. And
we're getting deep into church history.
We're getting deep into
on
church
Right to Life
history,
Radio.
4th century AD. And at that time, the Roman emperors in the West were living in Milan. And St. Ambrose, was the bishop of Milan. And St. Ambrose is very famous. He was a father of the church in his own right, and he also baptized St. Augustine. And St. Augustine was also completely wowed by St. Ambrose because he was the first person Augustine had met who read without reading out loud.
Oh, I actually think I've heard that story.
It's a little bit in the Confessions where he was like totally amazed at someone who read without, reading the words out loud, which apparently was not a very common thing in the ancient world. Anyway, so St. Ambrose basically had to confront the Emperor Theodosius because Theodosius had basically engaged in war crimes. He had murdered a large group of people in Greece over some political snafu. And Theodosius basically said to him, I'm not letting you into the church until you've repented. Like, I'm literally not letting you come into my cathedral to go to church until you've repented. And he actually, it took, to say that to the Roman emperor, the most powerful man in the world, took a lot of guts on St. Ambrose's part. And it worked. It basically, Theodosius actually did repent and was subsequently allowed back into communion with the church. But what St. Ambrose was basically saying was, look, I can't just have you come in and just give you communion, which Catholics also believe that people shouldn't receive Holy Communion unless they're in the state of grace. They're not actively conscious of some serious sin for which they haven't repented. The Catholic Church basically thinks it's hypocritical to be going to a strip club on a Saturday night and then going to church on Sunday morning like everything's fine and receiving Holy Communion.
I think most evangelicals would second that opinion.
Yeah. And I feel like people would hold that opinion even if they don't believe what the Catholic Church believes with regard to the Eucharist, that if you're not in a good place, some kind of repentance, some kind of reforming of your life is necessary.
Well, John, the thing that you can tell that is so frustrating about this is that the mainstream media, and especially left-leaning, progressive, secular mainstream media, has no problem whatsoever calling out hypocrisy if it is on the right.
Sure.
If you have, for example, there are multiple examples in the 1980s.
Well, I'm thinking of one in the last few years whose dad was a famous preacher, Jerry Falwell Jr.
Yes.
Jerry Falwell Jr. was very important as the president of Liberty University and turns out to have been engaged in a lot of unsavory stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was
rightly villainized.
And also removed, not excommunicated, but removed from his position as the chancellor and president of Liberty University.
Right. Rightly so.
And there was no problem. Our friends on the left were like, oh my gosh, look at this, here's this guy who's moralizing on the one hand, and then he's, affairs and yada, 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 stuff that's not appropriate for a family radio show.
We're going to cover it up with a lot of yada yadas, but in the spirit of Elaine Bennis.
But in that situation, obviously, can you believe this person who claims to be devoutly religious, who is so clearly betraying and transgressing the tenets of his faith that he claims to believe?
Right. But meanwhile, when Jerry Falwell Jr. does it, how dare he? When Joe Biden does it, it's,
those right wing.
Who's to say he's not an Orthodox devout Catholic?
If he says he's an Orthodox devout Catholic.
Well, it's like, and again, it's this thing of Catholicism is not what you make of it. There's a certain objective content.
It's almost like the media is just trying to say, who am I to judge?
Exactly. Well, all right. All right. So, folks, at any rate, hopefully if you're not a Catholic, you found that enlightening. A little inside Catholic baseball, but I think it's important that all of us who are Christians try to live lives consistent with what our faith actually teaches. When we return, just building off of this, the fallacy of the personally opposed to abortion viewpoint. Next. Jackson Brown with us here on Right to Life Radio. This is somebody's baby. Everybody's somebody's baby at some point. All right, Right to Life Radio. After that awkward start. So, Jonathan, we've been talking about the very Catholic Joe Biden and the desire of a rising crowd of right-wing bishops to deny him Holy Communion. Such right-wing nut jobs as Archbishop Jose Gomez from Los Angeles, who anyone who knows anything about Jose Gomez knows that he is not right-wing. That is probably the last phrase you would actually use to describe Archbishop Gomez.
Yes.
He's on any range of things, whether it's social welfare spending or immigration stuff, has very firmly established that he's can hardly be called right wing.
Well, and John, this is the thing that is so,
and that's not a criticism.
No.
I'm just being descriptive here.
It's just incredibly lazy by the Washington Post and by the media, the religious media establishment generally, because the term right wing, when you are speaking to American readers writing from the newspaper based in the American capital of Washington, D.C., right wing is going to have a very specific connotation.
Sure.
But that is almost completely inapplicable to a bishop who was born and I think raised in Mexico.
He was born in Mexico.
And
yeah,
took over the largest diocese in, I think, the United States.
It's either one or two. I think it's one.
And has predominantly a huge population of migrants, immigrants into the United States. I mean, like you said, the whole phrase right wing, the term.
Let me just put it this way. Very highly doubt that Archbishop Gomez has a MAGA hat in his closet.
I would say that's probably true.
I would be willing to bet all 10 of my fingers that is the case.
Yeah, and I mean, again,
possibly all 10 of my toes as well.
And again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being an actual right wing bishop if you are politically right wing, or nothing wrong with being a more quote unquote not right wing bishop.
But it's just flat out untrue. It's just untrue to say that this is just a bunch of right-wing bishops trying to, who just finished listening to the Sean Hannity show, who are now like, all right, let's go get that Joe Biden. No, they're concerned about integrity as far as what we profess as Catholics and what we are allowing as far as these public officials who are professing to be Catholic but acting in opposition to that, or saying these mealy-mouthed sort of excuses of, well, I'm personally opposed to something as murder, but I don't think it should be illegal.
Well, and there's a big difference between being politically conservative in the American tradition versus being theologically orthodox.
Sure.
Those can have overlap on a Venn diagram,
sure,
but it is not synonymous.
It is not synonymous, no. And this ties into a very common pro-choice argument, which is often used in the religious sphere. And it's used by such persons as Joe Biden, as Mario Cuomo, Andrew's dad, who was very famously made this argument and popularized this argument, which is the idea of being personally opposed to abortion. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I personally don't think abortion's wrong, but I'm not going to enforce my viewpoints on other people. I'm not going to mandate my views or the views of the Catholic Church on everyone. Just because I think abortion is immoral doesn't necessarily mean I think it should be made illegal. I think adultery is immoral, but I'm not necessarily going to make that illegal. Why should abortion be any different? I will note that many, many American states made adultery illegal, and there's actually a very good case to be made that it should still be illegal. But
yes.
Anyway, beside the point, what we're talking about here is homicide. Okay, when you cut through everything, what you're talking about is the killing of an innocent human being. And while other kinds of things, you can apply this standard of, I think it's immoral, I don't necessarily think it should be illegal, okay? I think talking back to your mother is immoral. I don't necessarily think it should be illegal. I think the mechanisms of the state would have to employ to catch mother talk backers would be so onerous and so impractical as to be ridiculous, and that the state does not need to suppress every vice or punish every vice or reward every single virtue. But what we're talking about here is murder. So what you're basically saying is, I think this category of murder is immoral, but I don't think it should be made illegal. There's no way that makes sense. Murder is such a public harm. It's such a public attack on the integrity of the state and against someone continuing to live that it is impossible in any sort of reasonable legal setting to say, well, I think this kind of murder is immoral. I wouldn't do it, but I'm certainly not going to protect anybody who might be subject to it. That's the illogic of the personally opposed position. That'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We'll see you next week. Thank you, folks.